I'm talking now with Raf from Ghana, from the University of Ghana, if I'm correct, who is one of the project partners in our project. And the project basically aims to contribute to build new opportunities for fostering the positive sustainability impact of trade. And we are looking into the impact of trade policy on a national, EU and global level, including the WTO modernization, and what is the impact of these on the Sustainable Development Goals. So we started the project now almost exactly 2 years ago. So the first question to you, Raf, is do you think that the project is still relevant? Is it still valid? Could this bring a change, you think, in the extremely fast changing global environment to trade policies? Do you think it's still a valid project to run?
Thank you, Zoltan. I think it is. I think the Trade for SD project couldn't have come at a better time to foster the linkages that we think there should be or there are, and how they can be, strengthened with the Sustainable Development Goals. I mean, it couldn't have come at a better time. I think it still has relevance, the objectives of the project, and at this point, what we can do is just to see lessons learned and how we can even foster stronger linkages, as it were. So yes, if you ask me, I would say the project's objectives are still relevant. There are amazing lessons to be learned and things that could be improved moving forward. Yeah,
thanks. When we started the project, the COVID pandemic hit, actually. How do you think that such an event like the COVID, or maybe even the climate change, that are now among the highest priorities in the international policy arena, had an impact on the relationship between trade and the SDGs?
It's quite interesting. I mean, COVID disrupted quite a number of things. Was it yesterday or so that I heard from the WHO director that it is no longer a pandemic, but when it hit, it was quite serious, affected supply chains massively. Here in Ghana, we had disruptions in the supply chain, in movement of goods and even services. And so COVID-19, yes, had a serious impact on trade and trade-related activities. Climate change does same. For example, if I may take one of the value chains in Ghana, cocoa, the impact of climate change is telling. And I need to also mention that there are some other activities that are even affecting or exacerbating the effect of climate change, and that is indiscriminate mining and also the extensification of agricultural activities into forested areas. These things affect or exacerbate the effects of climate change, and in fact, they go a long way to affect trade and trade-related activities, especially when the commodities of interest are export commodities that also are intermediary, should I say, inputs for the final output. So yes, COVID had an impact. Climate change still has an impact. We are seeing COVID's impact relaxing a little bit, but there is still some, I don't want to call it fear, but its effect is still lingering in some way, but has not stopped the trade game, if I should just put it that way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. If I understand correctly, personally, I have never been in Ghana, but if I understand it correctly, most of the supply chain to the farmers in Ghana are relatively small farmers, and so for them, trade policies are probably very complex and kind of far away issues. But how do you see that the impact of trade policies can help Ghana, or can block Ghana to reach the achievement of SDGs? Is there any particular?
Yeah, Yeah, like you mentioned, I mean, I would take it as like an hourglass of a sort. We have so many farmers, and then we have so many consumers, and in the middle we have the key players, like those who transport the commodities, etc., those who facilitate the commodity from the farmers to the consumers. Now, many of these farmers may not read the trade agreement, but they actually experience the repercussions of the agreement, right? So the agreement may happen at the top, but whatever is happening there will trickle down. For example, if the EU has an agreement with Ghana regarding the export of a particular type of produce, say peas, right? They need to meet the standard of the EU. So the one who is exporting must make sure that the farmers he's buying from are following are complying with the standards of the EU. So there is a way that these standards are communicated to the farmers in such a way so that they would comply with them. Need I say that it is not always the case that you would have all farmers complying with standards, and for that reason you would have some of the commodities rejected if they have to be exported. So yes, and one of the ways that the government is making sure that farmers understand some of these standards is to communicate these standards through agricultural extension agents to the farmers. But I need to say that the extension officer to farmer ratio is really off. The desire is to have one extension officer to about 500 farmers, but as it stands now, we have one extension officer to nearly 1,000 farmers or more. Could be, but definitely not the 500, more than the 500. So these present certain pressures on the communication system, and you probably may not be able to communicate the standards to them. But when it comes to key commodities like cocoa, the standards are communicated right from the top to the farmers. So here we have some certification schemes that communicate the standards to the farmers, and without the farmers meeting those standards, they will not buy from them. So farmers ensure that these standards are adhered to, and then the quality control company of Ghana's cocoa, what we call cocoa board, so the regulatory body for all cocoa activities in Ghana, we have a quality control company of that cocoa board that ensures that every single one of those standards are met. And if cocoa does not meet that standard, it is going to be rejected.
Mm-hmm. Right, very interesting. And I don't think I say anything really secret, but I send my questions in advance to you. So I'm just telling it for the audience who will listen to the podcast. But as you speak now, I have a question which I didn't send to you. How do you think that non-trade policies, like for instance the European Union has now adopted a new deforestation law, which aims to actually block those commodity products to enter the European Union market that are associated with deforestation or forest degradation? How do you think that these type of policies, like non-trade policies, impact the trade? Has this been communicated also to farmers?
In a way, we would have some of these things being mentioned to farmers, but let's face the fact that most of these farmers are producing at the subsistence level. I wouldn't want to say subsistence level, but they are producing on a smallholder basis, right? Majority of these farmers are producing on a smallholder basis. So you have a group of farmers who maybe have, if it is something like say maize, they have 10 bags of maize, 2 bags, 3 bags of maize that they want to sell, right? And then you have an aggregator who goes in there to collect all the corn or maize and does whatever trade that he wants to do with. The main concern of the farmer is how can I get my produce on the market for someone to buy? Whatever they're going to do with it is their own problem, right? So it is important. For example, if I am going to export the commodity, I must ensure that everyone I am aggregating from adheres to the lay down procedure. Let me use cocoa once again. So the EU and other international bodies or partners decided that they didn't want to buy cocoa that is grown with child labor, right? So what did they do? They came up with a certification scheme, making sure that they are not going to receive cocoa or import cocoa from Ghana that is grown using child labor, right? So they started by ensuring that there is education sent all the way to the farmer to ensure that they were not using child labor on their farm to produce cocoa. Otherwise, the cocoa was not going to be bought, right? And so if I know that my cocoa would not be bought because I use child labor, I can do one of two things. Either I desist from using child labor, or I do not report using child labor. But the latter can easily be contested, because you could be on the farm and then a supervisor may come and see that, oh, child is working on the farm, and so we are not going to buy your produce, right? So there are some checks and balances just to ensure that, farmers ensure they don't fall short of some of these standards, non-trade standards, and they will just follow through the quality control measures, just so they can sell their produce and have some money. And I think the whole issue has been with that broad base, like I said, that broad base of smallholder farmers who need to produce to sell just so that they can take care of liquidity constraints that they have.
Oh, yeah. So
these are important, actually. Let me follow up and say that in the olden days, right, the forefathers knew the importance of forests, and so they were very measured when it came to extensifying their production into forested areas, right? But for selfish reasons, you may have some people actually conducting extensification procedures into reserve areas to produce, but it is not allowed under Ghana law.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Thanks very much to say this, because I myself wrote a blog post on the project website about the impact of non-trade policies on trade. In this case, my article was more about the Renewable Energy Directive. But anyway, the last question I still have is that do you think that the EU policies in terms of fair trade are coherent with the implementation of the SDGs? And if not, how do you think what situation should be changed, what elements should be changed? And if yes, hopefully your answer is yes to the first question, what way this coherence works?
You see, I would say that more is always better, right? That's Oliver Twist, right?
Yeah.
But what I would say is that what could be done to improve the current situation, right? Because yes, we have an EU Ghana EPA and fair trade, a fair trade component. We've had it over the years, right? In Ghana, when you talk about even like cocoa, and I'm using cocoa because the trade for SD, we focused mainly on cocoa here in Ghana. We have a certification scheme called, we have a fair trade certification scheme. Now, currently what is happening is that Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, who are the largest producers of cocoa in the world, have implemented something we call a living income differential, where for every ton of cocoa that is exported or sold on the world market, they receive a $400 premium, which goes to enhance the incomes of farmers who produce cocoa, right? So fair trade ideas or fair trade mechanisms have been triggered in one way or another, just to make sure that farmers are selling their cocoa at a competitive price. See, in the case of Ghana, cocoa-related activities are heavily regulated by the state. So every year or every cropping year, the state will announce the price at which cocoa will be bought, a bag of cocoa will be bought, right? And farmers come to that understanding that, okay, this year I'm selling my cocoa for, say, $80 a bag or $100 a bag, etc., right? So they have this in mind while they also keep the other sustainability issues in mind. Sustainability issues like their income, which they always complain isn't enough. Another is environmental issues like environmental degradation, extensification into forested areas, farming too close to water bodies, etc., the use of pesticides, etc. And then social issues that have to do with things like child labor, etc. So yes, the EU policies in terms of fair trade are coherent, but I would say more could be done to improve them so that they will lead to attaining the SDGs, if not faster, then faster and in a broader way.
Yeah, thanks very much. That was my last question. So again, we now stop the podcast, and thank you, Ralph, too. Do you have any last comment that you would like to make, or otherwise we will again hopefully see each other very soon in Rome during the annual general meeting? Any last comment you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a brilliant idea. This podcast is a brilliant idea for us to, come to terms with some of the things that are happening in the countries where we are implementing trade for SD, and then also to get like first-hand some country-specific case studies. Getting to know what is happening. I would say that currently as we speak, the EU-Ghana Economic Partnership Agreement has certain lapses, right? It has certain lapses. There are certain gaps in there that could be filled. And I think this project presents a wonderful opportunity to fill those gaps, right? Our lessons learned could help to contribute to addressing those gaps. For example, the trade and sustainability chapter in the EPA agreement. I don't know if it is there. I've spoken to a few people who have raised concerns regarding the EU-Ghana EPA and the fact that we don't have clear-cut trade and sustainability development chapter in there. In areas like Vietnam, they have the chapter. They even have the fair trade agreement, etc. Ghana's agreement has been more of an economic partnership agreement, right? We need to be more specific. We need to take the problem and address it. If we want to address issues of fair trade, let's come in there. Let's concentrate on fair trade. Let's address it. Let's see where it takes us. And we cannot do without linking them to the sustainable development goals, right? So if it is maybe 2 or 3 SDGs that we want to focus on, let's focus on them. Let's try to make impact. Then we can learn lessons to address the other ones as we move on.
Thanks. Thank you.